Hello, my name is Tony. Francis Ford Coppola released his movie Bram Stoker's Dracula in 1992. It was a big hit in the States, grossing $212 million against a budget of $40 million, and the critics were mostly positive. Me though, I didn't like it much. Overblown, loud, bombastic, over-stylized and hyper-romanticized, and that jerky stop-start camera work insulted the shit out of my retinas. It wasn't what it said on the tin either. Stoker's original Dracula was a supernatural monster whose primary aim was to invade England, the country he saw as the centre of the modern world, to dominate it by spreading a rippling, exponential plague of vampirism. What became the modern-day mythic fear of illegal immigration as a human infection paving the way for domination by a foreign species was at the core of Stoker's novel. An irrational phobia of immigration is nothing new, folks, and that's what Bram Stoker's novel Dracula exploited. Somewhere along the way, the King Vamp became Vlad Tepes, or Vlad the Impaler. In the book, it is suggested that he is possibly a descendant, but nothing is conclusively established. Recast as a tragic, romantic figure, grieving for a lost love, searching for her down the ages, pining for the fjords and so forth. No. Stoker's Dracula was more a static character, a predatory monster, a devilish terrorist. Certainly not the partially humanized, terminally anguished emo as reimagined by modern popular culture. He was purely evil, a satanic force, add to the bone blood-sucking fiend from hell. I like Gary Oldman a lot, a superb actor when the wind is in the right direction, but he wasn't the right choice for Dracula. I'm not sure what accent he was attempting, but the vocal inflections were odd as fuck and it roamed around a lot. Casting Keanu Reeves as Jonathan Harker was a crazy comedy move, a gloriously insane own goal, dude, and he was as hilariously bad as anyone with a single partially firing brain cell could have predicted. There was widespread ridicule even from supporters of the film, and deservedly so. Winona Ryder was surprisingly okay, but as for Anthony Hopkins, what the fuck was he thinking? One of my all-time favourite actors, possibly the most accomplished stage and screen performer of his generation, but his Van Helsing is like King Lear on a cocktail of amphetamine and acid with a crack cocaine suppository shoved up his arse for good measure. For me, it was mostly a disastrous misfire, but what do I know? Critics and the public seemed to like it, and no one seemed to mind that although it was a version of Dracula, it wasn't Bram Stoker's version, and therefore was deliberately misleading. Neither was it original in certain key elements of its adaptation, because ploughing the same furrow and staking the same claim, staking, get it, some 18 years earlier, was the Dan Curtis movie released variously as Dracula, or Dan Curtis's Dracula, or more significantly, Bram Stoker's Dracula. This more modest production, primarily made for US TV, might well have been the jackboot that kicked off repurposing Dracula as a sympathetic lovelorn demon Valentine we are now seemingly stuck with. Christopher Lee, my Dracula, the one I grew up with, was for my money the purest screen incarnation in respect to the spirit of the original, a towering, majestic, baritone-voiced, red-eyed icon of malevolence and menace. When he's still, he's like a black-clad snake in repose. When he attacks, he's this hissing, frenzied, fang-bearing nightmare, like an elegant, satanic death machine barreling towards his prey. When he seduces, he may lust, he may have desire, he may fixate on a female victim, but it's all about revenge, dominance, self-gratification, and the violation of innocence. It's never about love. That's not in the equation. So how can you sympathize and root for someone or something like that? You can't. You're not supposed to. That's the point. He's the fucking villain. It's that simple. Someone else is the hero. Dracula in the novel and in the Hammer movies never is. Not even close. Human beings are his food, his cattle, his sheep, his livestock, and he's out to destroy or enslave them to do his bidding. He is the Prince of Darkness. It's not that hard to grasp. That's my boy, the one I want to see up on the screen, which is why I'm conflicted when it comes to the Dan Curtis version from 1974. I'll explain. It's scripted by Richard Matheson, and I'm very partial to his work. He's the guy who spearheaded the movement to shift horror fantasy out of the past and into the present. His genre-redefining novella, I Am Legend, written in the 1950s but set in the future of the 1970s, relocated the action to suburban Los Angeles, modern America, not the traditional traditional Gothic European enclaves of centuries ago. The world of I Am Legend sees the planet overrun by a plague of vampires, with only one last human male left alive, fighting to survive, fortifying his suburban home, hunting and staking the undead by day. It was the inspiration for the novels of Stephen King and zombie films of George A. Romero. It changed the rules of the game forever, and to my everlasting regret, it's never been filmed properly. Hammer were up for it, and Matheson provided them a script which the BBFC promptly refused to pass, so it never happened. Thanks for that, censor people. What we got are The Last Man on Earth from 1964, an Italian flick and the closest to the original source. It suffers from a badly miscast Vincent Price, very low production values, lackluster action, terrible acting, and moribund direction. Matheson wrote the screenplay but quickly disowned it. The Omega Man in 1971 featured Chuck Heston, still going through his sci-fi phase at that point, and although a decent standalone post-apocalyptic movie in its own right, had very little to do with Matheson's original. And worst of all, I Am Legend in 2007, a bludgeoning shitfest of a vehicle for Will Slapper Smith. God damn! The title was the closest it got to the source material. Will someone please just fucking film this book properly before I curl up my toes and bite the big enchilada? Please, someone. My time on Earth is not infinite. Just feels like it. Curtis cast Jack Palance as Dracula, and for me, he's a close second to Chris Lee, and that's something I don't say lightly. Lugosi, screen purists will scream. But sorry, no. The original isn't always the best, or even second best, and in this scenario, Bella's legend and portrayal has been superseded by so many others. And two of those, Lee and Palance, have never been bettered, although special mention to Klaus Bang in the BBC miniseries of 2020. His characterization was great, but the show was very quick to lose the plot. Although Matheson follows the original storyline in piecemeal snatches, he does sort of adhere to the basic content for the most part. It's 1897 and solicitor Jonathan Harker treks through Hungary to Transylvania to Castle Dracula. Obviously, no one's told him this is a bad idea. Along the way, there are the usual mutterings, cryptic warnings, and cross-making genuflections from the locals. But Harker's a modern man with a job to do. Meet with Count Dracula, pitch him some English real estate, and get him to take out a mortgage or buy a holiday home or timeshare by the sea or whatever. Drac takes a fancy to Carfax Abbey, a sprawling, crumbling ruin that looks even worse than where he lives now. On seeing a photograph of Harker and his fiancée Mina and her friend Lucy, Drac takes a fancy to Lucy. Lucy is a dead ringer for the dead wife of Vlad the Impaler, who, it's revealed, is the undead Dracula who has somehow managed to cheat death. We get to meet the three female vamps, Drac's sexy brides, who end up fanging Harker. There's the frigate, the Demeter, running aground at Whitby with only a dead captain lashed to the wheel and some coffin-sized boxes of soil on board. Lucy, Fiona Lewis, falling ill, looking anemic and sleepwalking. Her fiancé Arthur Homewood, Simon Ward, turn into a family friend for help, one Dr. Van Helsing, Nigel Davenport. Then there's Mina, Penelope Horner, staying with Lucy and her mother to lend a helping hand, whilst her paramour Harker is away being the plaything and food source for Drac's harem. Drac wants to grant Lucy immortality so they can be together forever, yuck. Lucy dies, comes back as one of the undead. Van Helsing figures out what's going on. He and Arthur stake her. Dracula is anguished, swears revenge, enslaves Mina by getting her to drink his blood, but in so doing makes her his psychic link so that under hypnosis she can track his whereabouts, like a sat-nav with a pair of tits and elaborate hair. Van Helsing and Arthur pursue him across Europe back to his castle, and in the climactic battle, a clear nod to the 50s Hammer remake with Lee and Cushing tearing down the drapes and letting the sunshine in provides a partial solution to punching his clock into the great beyond. The rest of the solution involves a big spear through his ticker. Dracula, Vlad Tepes, is no more. Now, when Coppola announced his film, he claimed he was going to make a version of the story like no other. Turned out to be not quite true. The reincarnated lost love angle and the gruesome romanticism were pilfered from the Dan Curtis version, along with the idea of conclusively making Dracula the Vlad the Impaler, and of course the psychic link element. So Coppola's vision was very much like another, this one. Yes, Matheson chose to omit characters and events surrounding them that Coppola included, Renfield, Jack Seward, Quincy Morris. But so what? John Adams' 1979 Dracula movie with Frank Langella was billed as a love story and was thus another stab at fusing gothic horror with romance which predated Coppola's. If when Coppola said like no other, he meant pretty much like some others, only not as good and rather fucking derivative, he'd have been closer to the truth. It's interesting to note that all the home video releases of Curtis's film were either titled Dan Curtis's Dracula or plain Dracula. Its original title, Bram Stoker's Dracula, no longer anywhere to be seen commercially. Is this so we don't get confused? Wouldn't confuse me. How about you? By now, you might be wondering if, and indeed why, I prefer the Dan Curtis-styled Bram Stoker's Dracula of 1974 over and above Coppola's Bram Stoker's Dracula of 1992. I can tell you that, yes, I do prefer it, and I'll tell you why. Jack Palance goes a long way to making the part his own. With his glittering snake eyes and chiseled angular features, he looks a suitably demonic count. Yes, I did say count. His whole demeanour is one of elegant poise and eerie stillness. Yet, when he's in attack mode, he is ferocious in a calculated and almost robotic way, seemingly gliding along like a spectre. An impressive and imposing entity clubbing and swatting aside his attackers in a hotel, it's as if they're nothing. Mere cardboard figures to be casually yet fatally swept out of his path. He radiates a brooding intensity in all that he does that occasionally detonates into explosive wrath. I may take issue with the romanticism, but it doesn't detract from the quality of his work nor alter that even in those more human and emotional moments, he effortlessly convinces. He keeps a grip, not slipping into unnecessary theatricality or hammy excess, which Palance did tend to do on occasion. It's no surprise to me that he was offered the chance to repeat the role several times, but for whatever reason turned it down. Fiona Lewis and Penelope Horner are delightfully picturesque as Lucy and Mina. Simon Ward always did well in period pieces and makes a decent enough sidekick for Van Helsing, played by Nigel Davenport, with a gruff yet kindly sort of gravitas and precision. Matheson's script isn't his best work, but it does the job, and I can understand why he felt the romantic angle might add a layer of complexity and perhaps even depth to the character, whilst making it distinct from previous screen incarnations. Curtis's direction is spare and economical, nothing grandiose or earth-shattering, which befits the film's made-for-television status, straightforward and competent. He made 2 prints of the film, one for US TV and one for theatrical release in Europe. The latter and better print is much gorier and more explicit, but in keeping with the time in which it was made. Tame by today's standards, yet overall a better picture. The cinematography by Oswald Morris, who had a superb resume of classic films to his credit, is dreamlike, nightmarish, faintly ethereal, and quite oppressively gothic. The nighttime sequences having quite an impressive visual ambiance. It's less bloated, less indulgent, less pretentious than Coppola's garish carnival of goth bombast, and for me a much better and more accessible proposition. It was the first to implement the romantic twist, which succeeding efforts simply copied, as if it were an authentic Stoker invention. Do the fucking research, writers and directors, and don't call your movie something it quite obviously isn't. Call it Francis Ford Coppola's Dracula, and have the courtesy to acknowledge your influences. Original, my dick. If you like vampire movies, ones featuring Dracula in particular, and you haven't seen it, then Curtis's concoction is well worth a spin. And if you weren't particularly enamoured of the Coppola outing, then the added bonus is you can watch it and feel all smug and justified like I do, which is nice, trust me. Thanks for taking the time to spare me your attention and indulgence. I do appreciate it. Like, don't, comment, subscribe, however the mood takes you. I'll be back with something else in the very near future. You can rest assured it will be something else, because I've already done this. Oh yes. Night fell so quickly, sudden and sickly. Everybody wants to kill me now. Can't face the daybreak, headache and heartache. Everybody wants to kill me now. Struck like lightning, made you the tinder to black as a cinder. Everybody wants to burn me now, like I'm unaware of the things you took care of. Everybody wants to tell me now. You were an angel, at least in appearance. You were my final solution. The last man left standing at the place of mine own execution. Their scapegoat. Everybody wants to kill me now. I'm more than willing if they want a villain. Everybody wants to kill me now. When I first met you, love struck like lightning, made you my fatal addiction. Some minutes later, and I'm a spectator at the scene of my own crucifixion. Everybody wants to kill me. Everybody wants to kill me. Everybody wants to kill me. Everybody wants to kill me.